I'm J.K. McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, www.messianicapologetics.net. This is September the 11th, 2018. Good evening from my office here in Dallas, Texas, and we are going to have a friendly Messianic chat on how do you pronounce the name of God. This is a very live wire issue in various sectors. In particular, a sector which I have called for years the sacred name only movement or sub-movement, composed otherwise of snow people, S-N-O, snow, that's where it comes from. But this is something that's a very live wire issue. It's something that gets a lot of people upset because on the one hand, you do have the whole sacred name only movement. Unless you pronounce the Tetragrammaton YHWH, then our Creator is probably not hearing your prayers. And similarly, unless you use the correct Hebrew form of the name of the Messiah, then you might not be saved. Then there's the other side of this discussion, which is, much more academic. And that's where we're going to be coming from this evening. The academic side approaches the Tetragrammaton. Yes, when you read the Hebrew scriptures and you come across what appears in English Bibles typically as capital L-O-R-D, the Lord, that is where the YHWH appears in the source text. We don't deny that, but in Second Temple Judaism, the divine name wasn't used. The divine name was only spoken once a year in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, which we're coming up on, by the high priest. It wasn't used by the populace at large. And usage of the divine name fell out after the return of the Southern Kingdom exiles from Babylon, because one of the potential causes of the exile is that not only did usage of the divine name YHWH become so prevalent, but it was commonly used as a slur or as a curse. And so in order to make God's name much more hallowed, much more holy, much more revered, it was only spoken by the high priest in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And so instead you see various titles used for the Supreme Being. In the Hebrew scriptures, you see Elohim, God. You see Adonai, Lord. Also in Second Temple Jewish literature, you'll see terms like heaven or the place or kingdom of heaven or the name used as references to the Creator. In fact, the Gospel of Matthew fluently uses the term heaven or kingdom of heaven, and that's really just another term for God very frequently. So academically, we recognize that Yeshua of Nazareth did not use the divine name YHWH. We also recognize that academically, Yeshua and his apostles adhered to the Second Temple Jewish protocol for the divine name. They would have used Hebrew terms like Elohim or Adonai, their Greek equivalents being Kurios and Theos. But still, as a matter of Bible study, we run across the YHWH in the Hebrew scriptures, and we wonder, okay, what do we do with this? Just as a matter of studying the Hebrew scriptures. Because a big problem with the whole sacred name only movement is they don't agree on how to pronounce YHWH. You've got all these different forms that they propose for YHWH. And then just surveying some of the things which have been written and some of the things which appear in various Bible dictionaries and encyclopedias. What is the divine name YHWH? Is it Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah? Is it Jehovah? Is it Yehovah? I mean, all of these different proposals, and everybody who thinks it's this or that has their various reasons. Now, you look at our ministry's teachings and our ministry's materials, we don't use the divine name except in some kind of an academic context. You're going to see us refer to God as, guess what? God. You're going to see us refer to the Lord as the Lord. That's pretty commonplace in Judaism as well as Protestantism. We don't tend to really get caught up in this whole names business as other people do. But when we need to bring out the divine name YHWH, we will, and we won't freak out about it. We don't have some phobia that, oh, if somebody slips up and they use a form like Yahweh, we're the ground's going to open up and we're going to get swallowed whole. No, instead, we recognize that, look, there are different scholars who, in their commentaries, they're going to use some form of YHWH, and they're using it to make a point to those who are examining a particular text. This evening, how do we pronounce the name of God? How do you pronounce the name of God? I've got a few resources that I'm going to be reading from and interjecting comments from. There is a link in the description to an article which has been a part of our ministry's repertoire from the very beginning. In fact, even before Outreach Israel, the article goes back to 1999, so it's 19 years old now, even though it's gone through a number of edits and expansions. It's the article Sacred Name Concerns, and in the article Sacred Name Concerns, there's a section called Can We Know with Certainty How to Pronounce the Divine Name? And I'm going to read a number of paragraphs from this section. One important key to the debate surrounding this issue regards the pronunciation of the name YHWH, and you will see the YHWH represented in Jewish and Christian works alike as either YHWH or YHVH. And I confirmed that this afternoon by going into a number of my Jewish encyclopedias, because normally you would expect in a Jewish encyclopedia for it to just be represented as YHVH, whereas in Christian works it may be represented as YHWH or YHVH. But no, I saw YHWH. We'll get into that in a moment. To many Jews, it is considered the unspeakable name of God. A major part of this is due to the fact that, well, not only do you want to hallow or sanctify or make holy the divine name YHWH, but the exact pronunciation of the divine name has been contested, having been lost to antiquity. All anyone can provide is some theory, usually based on available evidence from the Second Temple period and immediately thereafter, or various clues from Hebrew linguistics and Semitic studies. So all anybody can propose is a best guess. It is notable that most sacred name-only organizations cannot agree upon the exact pronunciation of YHWH. Each has its own theory about how to pronounce our Heavenly Father's name. Renderings range from the common forms Yahweh and Yahweh to Yahuwah, YHWH, Yahvah, and Yahuwah, just to name a few. Many choose to write it as either YHVH or YHWH in standard Roman letters. And yes, some even insist on using the Hebrew letters YHWH, either in the common block script or in some kind of Paleo-Hebrew script. I think it's always interesting how some people, and I remember going back to before the turn of the millennium even, there was this wave that hit the broad Messianic world, people insisting that you say the name Yahweh, YHWH, and now they have switched over to one of these other forms for the divine name, like either Yahuwah or Yahuwah or one of those. So people who, they get into this and they make a huge deal out of it, they often change their pronunciation at a later point. There's no stability in this whole, sacred name only arena. Now, scholars have debated for centuries over the exact pronunciation of God's name based on available linguistic evidence and testimonies from ancient history. But all that anyone can provide is, once again, a best guess. B.W. Anderson notes the following in the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. He says, In the earliest Hebrew, the sacred name appeared as a four-letter word or tetragrammaton. So when you see the term tetragrammaton used in biblical studies, it just means a word of four letters in reference to the divine name. Here it is transliterated as YHWH, and then in parentheses, the YHVH in Hebrew, without any vowel signs. Since the vowels were added very late, at the time of the fixing of the Masoretic text, the Old Testament itself gives no clue to its original pronunciation. Some help, however, is given by the early church fathers. Theodoret of Cyrus from the 4th century AD testifies that the Samaritans, who shared the Pentateuchal scripture with the Jews, pronounced the name Iaba, and that is those are the four Greek letters iota, alpha, beta, and epsilon, the equivalent of IABE. And Clement of Alexandria, early 3rd century AD, transliterated the name of four letters as Iaua, which is the equivalent of the Greek iota, alpha, omicron, upsilon, epsilon. So that would be AIOUE. Moreover, Egyptian magic papyri from the end of the 3rd century AD attest to the patristic spelling, particularly that of Theodoret. Following these hints, modern scholars believe that the approximate pronunciation was Yahweh, unquote. Although, even with that, there's some variances of the pronunciation. Some pronounce it Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. I mean, something along those lines. I've heard various, tweaks on the pronunciation, even when it's broadly agreed it's somewhere in the ballpark of Yahweh. Now, Yahweh has become the most common pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton in the scholastic community, but no complete certainty can be attached to this pronunciation. There are some variant pronunciations such as Yahuwah or Yahweh, which some prefer. A default position is to represent the name of God by the consonants YHWH or YHVH. We can, however, be confident that Jehovah or Yehovah is not the correct pronunciation of YHWH. As Anderson further notes, this is an artificial form often attributed to Petrus Galentinus in AD 1520. So we're talking the 16th century here, the 1500s, which results from the combination of the consonants of the Tetragrammaton with the substitute vowel reading, which was introduced in the 6th to 7th centuries AD. Of the various substitutes that were employed, the chief was Adonai, or Lord, the vowels of which the Masoretes, as a rule, added to the consonants YHWH to indicate that Adonai should be read. The combination of the two, the Tetragrammaton and the vowels of Adonai, yields the artificial name, unquote. Any of you who have studied the history of the Hebrew Scriptures and you access a copy of the canonical Hebrew Masoretic text know that the vowel markings underneath the letters were added during the Middle Ages. And in order, once again, to sanctify the divine name YHWH, because in Second Temple Judaism, the divine name was not spoken aloud, and in the synagogue, the protocol is that when you come across YHWH in the text, you pronounce it instead as Adonai. The vowel markings for Adonai were placed underneath the YHWH. And so, seeing this in the Middle Ages, Petrus Galentinus decided, well, what about this form Iaova, or hence what would become known as Jehovah? And there are people out there in the Messianic world you will see today who actually do think that the divine name is Yehovah. I think they're mistaken, and many others would agree that they are mistaken because this is what it goes back to. But when you see people use the form Yehovah, it's because they think that the vowel markings should be applied to YHWH, the vowel markings for Adonai. Because the Hebrew language has no vowels, the Masoretes, whose job it was to copy the texts of the Hebrew scriptures, added special markings underneath letters to indicate vowel sounds. For the name YHVH, the vowel markings for Adonai or Lord were applied, so the cantor in the synagogue would read Adonai. Some early Christian Bible translators applied the vowel markings for Adonai and came up with the name Jehovah. So that's where it comes from. There are still a fair number of Christians who use the form Jehovah, albeit in error. Actually, even though most Christian Bibles throughout history have followed Jewish convention and they've rendered the YHVH in the Tanakh as L-O-R-D, the Lord, in all capital letters, the 1901 American Standard Version actually did use the form Jehovah. And yes, there are some other versions today which follow suit, like the New World Translation by the cult known as the Jehovah's Witnesses. The scholastic community today, in contrast, is more likely to use the form Yahweh or simply YHWH. There are some in the Messianic community, believe it or not, who believe that they know what the correct name of God is. The problem with this is that the pronunciation of his name has been debated for centuries, and one of the reasons why Jews today do not use it is because his name was only spoken aloud by the high priest on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies. So we got Yom Kippur now barreling down on us. Perhaps today we may not view speaking God's name as some kind of a superstition. For example, seeing the name YHVH or forms such as Yahweh used in academic journals and publications. But considering the debate over how God's name is pronounced, it would be best for all of us to respect historical precedents, knowing that our Father has a name, but treating it with the respect and the holiness that it deserves. And I believe that all of today's Messianic people need to follow Jewish orthopraxy in this regard. It's one thing for you at your Messianic congregation to have a closed Bible study and somebody to crack open a study Bible or crack open some commentary where the commentator, the author, whoever says Yahweh. It's another thing to, during your Shabbat service, especially during the fall high holidays, during other special events, when you are trying to attract Jewish non-believers to your assembly in order to present them with the good news of Israel's Messiah. It's very different if you have somebody get up there and say Yahweh this or Jehovah or Yahuwah or whatever form. That is something which should not be permitted to go on. That's going to present Jewish people with significant obstacles to hearing the good news of Israel's Messiah. It's just going to unnecessarily complicate things. And likewise, you do not want sacred name only people coming into your Messianic congregation and gaining a foothold, being able to pull people off to the side and say, well, this place doesn't use the sacred name and they're off and the leadership, just hasn't been shown the truth and blah, blah, blah. You don't want that. You want people who think that they have to use the divine name YHVH to be informed. Look, this is a Messianic congregation. We have a significant witness here in our local community to reach out with the good news to Jewish people who need to know Yeshua, and using the divine name without some, very, strict procedures like, a closed Bible study is not what we do here, because we follow Second Temple Jewish protocol, the same as Yeshua and his disciples, who did not make using the divine name a big issue. Now, another resource that I'd like to quote from, and I looked this up this afternoon. This is from the Anchor Bible Dictionary, Volume 6. Some of you may have a copy of the Anchor Bible Dictionary in your personal or private or congregational library. Maybe, maybe not. This is definitely to the left of center resource. But the Anchor Bible Dictionary tends to be very good when it comes to matters of Hebrew linguistics and Semitic studies, this sort of thing. And so it actually does have an entry entitled Yahweh for the letter Y. And it goes into some of the factors of why, at least in the academic community, the form Yahweh is the preferred form. And this is what it has to say. The pronunciation of YHWH, that's YHVH, as Yahweh is a scholarly guess. Hebrew biblical manuscripts were principally consonantal in spelling until well into the current era. The pronunciation of words was transmitted in a separate oral tradition. See the Masoretic text. The Tetragrammaton was not being pronounced at all. The word Adonai, my Lord, being pronounced in its place. Elohim, God, was substituted in cases of the combination Adonai YHWH. Though the consonants remained, the original pronunciation was eventually lost. When the Jewish scholars called Masoretes added vowel signs to the biblical manuscripts some time before the 10th century AD, the Tetragrammaton was punctuated with the vowels of the word Adonai or Elohim to indicate that the reader should read Lord or God instead of accidentally pronouncing the sacred name. So there are some places where you'll see Adonai and then YHWH appear where the YHWH may have the vowel markings for Elohim. And so in various English Bibles, that's where you would see the translation of Lord in all capital letters, God, or you would see Lord in small capital letters and God in all capital letters. So just be aware of that. It says here that Adonai YHWH appears 305 times, unlike the YHWH itself, which appears 6,000 times. All right. The form Jehovah results from reading the consonants of the Tetragrammaton with the vowels of the surrogate word Adonai. The dissemination of this form is usually traced to Petrus Galentinus, confessor to Pope Leo X, who in 1518 transliterated the 4 Hebrew letters with the Latin letters YHVH together with the vowels of Adonai, producing the artificial form Jehovah. This confused usage, however, may have begun as early as 1100 AD. While the hybrid form Jehovah has met much resistance and is universally regarded as an ungrammatical aberration. Let me repeat that. While the hybrid form Jehovah has met with much resistance and is universally regarded as an ungrammatical aberration, it nonetheless passed from Latin into English and other European languages and has been hallowed by usage in hymns and the American Standard Version. It is used only a few times in the King James Version and not at all in the Revised Standard Version. So we've all been at worship services where people have talked about Jehovah Jireh or Jehovah Rapha. Those forms are incorrect. But a lot of people use it because they have a sentimental connection to it. And as the entry here says, there are various hymns that have the form Jehovah, albeit in error. Okay, one more paragraph. The generally acknowledged vocalization Yahweh is a reconstruction that draws on several lines of evidence. The longer of the two reduced suffixing forms of the divine name Yah and Yahu indicates that the name probably had the phonetic shape Yahu with a final vowel. The vowel is supplied on the basis of the observation that the name derives from a verbal root, He, Vav, Yud, which would require the final vowel A. This inference is confirmed by the element Yahweh occurring in names in the Amorite language. In Aramaic letters from Elephantine in Egypt from 400 BC, the divine name occurs in spelling Yod He Vav, probably with the vocalization Yahu. Instances of the divine name written in Greek letters, such as Iao, equivalent to Yaho, Iaba, known to the Samaritans, Theodoret from the 4th century AD, and Epiphanius, and Iaua or Iauai from Clement of Alexandria, the 3rd century, and Ia also favor the form Yahweh. So people who believe that the divine name is pronounced Yahweh, that's the evidence that they base it on. And again, this entry is very honest. This is a guess. This is a guess. Now, one of the things that I do encounter from time to time when various Messianic Jews who grew up in the synagogue and they went to Hebrew school and they see forms like Yahweh, or they see the Tetragrammaton represented as YHWH, immediately conclude is that, now wait a second, there is no W sound in Hebrew. And as far as modern Hebrew goes, that is correct. And so they would say, well, if this is the general pronunciation, shouldn't we say Yahweh instead of Yahweh and represent it as YHVH instead of YHWH? There are plenty of resources that will, in fact, do that. But there are some things I'd like to stress here. Many of the transliterations in Roman characters that we see throughout a great number of Bible commentaries and encyclopedias and dictionaries originate from German and not British biblical scholarship. And any of you who have any kind of a passing knowledge of German know that what we consider the letter W is pronounced as a V in German. When I was in the political science department at the University of Oklahoma, we always used to make fun of people who would talk about this German scholar and German political expert named Max Weber as Max Weber. Now his surname was spelled W-E-B-E-R, but of course any of us who are in the know pronounced it from the German spelling, Max Weber. We would never say Max Weber. And so we do have to recognize that some of the representation of the divine name with the letter W comes from German, where the letter W is pronounced as our letter V. So that is a factor to consider. More significantly, and much more importantly, is how the letter Vav in Hebrew, of course, any of you who studied Hebrew should be familiar with how the letter Vav can also be, in various instances, employed as a vowel. It can be employed with the O sound or the U sound. But various Semitic experts and scholars whose expertise on Hebrew and related disciplines goes far beyond mine and far beyond yours would possibly conclude that the Vav in ancient times was pronounced a little softer. And so it may very well have been pronounced more like our letter W. And so in modern Hebrew, there is no letter W. The Vav is pronounced as a V. How much or how little of that has been affected by Central European influences, that's a matter of debate. And look, we're not here to debate the pronunciation of the name of God. We're just here to put some factors on the table, and so we can move forward and not freak out and not go into epileptic seizures and heart palpitations when we see the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in the Hebrew text, or we see forms like Yahweh, Yahweh, YHWH, and YHVH. We're adults here. We're supposed to be facilitating reason and logic and weighing evidence and weighing facts when these things come across our paths. Once again, I'm not somebody who uses the divine name of God unless I am engaged in some kind of academic issue where different scholars and different examiners are using forms like Yahweh or Yahweh, and likewise when it is necessary to point out that yes, we are speaking of this God, and yes, this is a theological issue that is directly impacted by us recognizing the presence of the divine name somewhere. And by the way, one of the most important areas where this does come up is when you see various passages in the Tanakh or the Old Testament where you see the one God of Israel, YHWH, where you see those passages apply to Yeshua the Messiah and him integrated into the divine identity. This is something that's very, very important, and it does come up. So hopefully our friendly Messianic discussion has given you some more information if you've been confused. There are a lot of things that circulate online involving the divine name YHWH, and you don't need to be confused. A lot of memes, a lot of really nasty statements that can be made on YouTube and other venues. The sacred name movement, has really done a lot of damage to the credibility of the Messianic movement, even though the Messianic movement doesn't use the divine name YHWH. Because it's an impediment to Jewish outreach and Jewish evangelism, and it was not used by Yeshua and his apostles. But if you have questions like this, do submit them to us, because we're set up as Messianic Apologetics to address these issues and to help you have some fair-minded resolution so we can move on to the next issue. And believe me, I keep a pad on my desk. I keep a pad handy, one of these little flip pads, and I just write topics down, things that you suggest and things that I run into passively, things that I don't even go and look for. They just come across my path passively. Tomorrow morning in our podcast live stream, on Wednesdays, we address the composition of the biblical books, and we will be considering the composition of the books of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, so you will not want to miss that. On behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your continued offerings and donations, equipping us to provide services like these, blessing people all over the world. You can sign up for a regular contribution at www.outreachisrael.net, or you can click the support link in the description. Good evening, and may God bless you.